Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Super Tees video, and I'm on the patch 11.2 PTR. I've made an Unholy Death Knight. I've been spending a lot of time with it on the current retail patch as well. Currently underway of trying to get 2400 rating on the Unholy Death Knight, so I've experienced its pain points, and I have my own thoughts on what I think could be improved for it to feel better in this patch. I've also been watching a lot of Mez's stream and getting his opinion on the specialization, as well as hanging out in Party Waffle's stream to get some of his insights onto the specialization and to kind of go over what is currently laid out, right? Because I think a lot of people are anticipating that Unholy DK could potentially be a god spec for 11.2. It seems like Unholy DK and Frost are both getting massive rework, talent tree readjustments, but is it really going to be enough in a PvP scenario for Unholy DK to thrive? So the first thing I did was I got a character fully geared up, try to get as close to the maximum item level available here for this patch, and you can see that's around 723 item level as everything is scaled up to that point, balancing a little bit of haste and mastery. It might be a little bit heavy on haste. I can figure out my crafted gear, get things perfectly itemized in that sense, but I just wanted to go over feel. So the first thing I noticed on Unholy DK when I'm attacking, as far as rotation, it feels very similar to the way that it currently is. You just build up wounds on the target here, and then you pop them, and you use Death Coil procs to call in a lot of enemies. Should have had my pets attacking here while we're going in on this, but the Death Coil procs feel pretty cool. I feel like I'm getting them a lot, quite frequently. And now what's cool about them as well is I've taken a talent that summons in a magus basically every time that I get one of these procs, which you can see all of these maguses behind me and this other Death Knight as we're tracking the training dummy. Like, you can get a lot of them going. You can do quite a lot of damage with them. I was kind of hoping that a pet build would be more of a viable option for this patch, because it feels like I haven't had a pet build in a while. But I do actually really like how the Death Coil sudden doom procs feel, and that was one of the main pain points that I experienced on retail, is that you didn't really feel like you had a burst moment. But now with this summoning in the ghoul, with how much damage it does, which I'll show you on the details after we've attacked the training dummy a little bit here, you'll notice that you're getting it a lot, and it gives you a little bit more of a pop when you're going on the DK, which is going to be important for your success in PvP situations, because it's that type of burst damage that really makes you feel more relevant. Much like the other classes that are, you know, strong and competitively viable, they have like a punch moment where you can actually feel that damage, you can kind of cut through, and you can really start getting some burst. So I found that this spam magus build is kind of cool. Summons in a bunch of maguses. You can see them attacking about 100k a tick a pop, maybe adding extra 400,000 damage. You can see that Death Coil is hitting substantially harder. It's 20% of my damage with just a couple of, you know, what, like a minute there attacking the training dummy, and it's critting upwards of 2.3 million. Now do note our HP is also going up. We have about 16 million right now, so that might feel pretty similar. And really, Death Coil is kind of the make or break it for your viability in terms of offense, in my opinion. If Death Coil isn't hitting in the right threshold, you're going to feel really weak. It needs to hit in a certain burst threshold. On the current retail patch, I'd say that it needs to be buffed to hit somewhere upwards of 1.8 million to 2 million, which it's hitting here on this patch. But again, the stamina is going up as well. So will it be enough? We'll have to wait and see, but I really hope that they focus in on making Death Coil more relevant as far as damage overall. You can see that the Magus of the Dead, even though it's only hitting for 300k, with how many procs you're able to get right now, you can get quite a few of these, get about 7% of your damage from it. The 4 Horsemen still feel really good. You're able to get a lot of called in pets, as well as with the changes to your set bonus. Well, not changes, sorry, but the enhancements that are now coming with it, where your Apocalypse will now summon in Whitemane, who's one of the 4 Horsemen, which does give you a little bit of damage reduction as well with your hero talent trees, which is nice, because squishiness, you know, and survivability has been an issue as well. And she's also going to be casting Death Coils with you when you cast Death Coil, which is, again, just buffing Death Coil damage, right? Whether it's a pet that's summoned in, it's casting Death Coil, it's making Death Coil hit a little bit harder. That's really important for viability of Death Knight. And then the same thing below, when you cast Death Coil, everything is mirrored. So this is a really cool effect. Basically, just Death Coil damage is increased during this window of time. Now, when I was talking to Mez, he felt like pet builds are not viable because basically this entire spec is being propped up by PvP modifiers on a lot of its core abilities, and the pets don't really have a lot of PvP modifiers. So as far as possible pet builds, it's probably unlikely. I think another issue also is that Necromancer's Bargain, I find, is really good. But if you take this, it doesn't summon the ghouls. And then if you don't take the ghouls, then you can't get the benefits really of Commander of the Dead because the ghouls aren't being summoned. You're just applying Crypt Fever to the target instead. So some PvP modifiers are likely going to be needed if we're going to see any sort of massive switch in build variety outside of kind of the Death Coil burst and kind of disease maintenance spec that we've seen for a while, moving from the last patch and likely into this patch, would require some PvP specific modifiers. So I do wonder if they're going to implement that, if they're going to go for that, do any PvP modifiers like that. I feel like Death Knight, unfortunately, because you have such a powerful mechanic with Chains of Ice and Death Grip in Battlegrounds, I feel like that's likely why they're reluctant to buff you, because if you bring meaningful damage and you have that toolkit, you just become absolutely God mode at the moment. But you know, what doesn't make sense to me is that Ret Paladin is also God mode in Battleground Blitz. I think it's one of the most popular specs, and it gets buffed and it gets stronger. So it feels like there's some bias there against Death Knights. I feel like you could go, you know, even maybe a step further and potentially look at nerfing things like Chains of Ice and Snares. I feel like a lot of melee DPS would agree that like snares above 50% need to have some type of substantial cooldown tied to them. Being able to permanently maintain a 70% plus snare is very problematic. When we played in Legion and they had PvP templates and they could do a lot of PvP specific tuning, they agreed on that back then, and they made it so basically all snares are 50% unless they have a cooldown, so something like a Piercing Howl with a substantial cooldown, so you can feel like you have a moment of impact, but melee aren't permanently snared. A flag carrier is not permanently snared. I feel like targeting that mechanic, which is inducing more frustration, and of course obviously Frost Mage is another big attributing factor to that, would probably go a lot further than making them not do enough meaningful damage, right, as far as the burst department. And I get they're trying to keep Frost and Unholy identifiably different, so maybe the route for them should be that they should buff pet modifiers and be kind of the pet build, much like a Demo Lock, so that Frost can remain as kind of the bursty 2-target cleave spec, and Unholy can have its identity in diseases and pets. That's one way to go about it, but without the PvP modifiers, I don't know if that's going to be unlikely the case or likely the case in that regard. So it's still kind of wait and see. They do updates seemingly like every second day of the week, and it's almost sporadically random at this point. Usually I was expecting to come out like a Thursday or Friday. Sometimes it come out Wednesday or Tuesday. Might even changes today. I don't know. I might be making a second video. But basically my initial thoughts so far is that worst case scenario, I think you're exactly the same, which isn't fantastic. It's not awful. It's not fantastic, but you're likely exactly the same with where it's currently standing for Unholy DK. Maybe slightly better, maybe like 5% better, and it really depends on the Death Coil modifiers that ultimately come through in their final iteration. If they do that and they can hit the nail on the head with how much damage Death Coil needs to hit for, with some PvP modifiers on the pet damage, then Unholy DK I think is going to be a very viable spec moving forward into patch 11.2, and those are just my thoughts. It basically plays the same, a little bit less keybinds, because now you have to choose between Abomination's Limb and Raise Abomination. But for the most part, gameplay, it's centering around a very similar playstyle at the moment. So to some that might come as a disappointment, to others that like it, it's great. Again, Unholy DK right now, really just to be more enjoyable, just needs some buffs on the back end. And we're going to be basically paying attention to see if that happens or not. Other than that, thank you guys very much for tuning into the video for the update here. Just trying to keep it straightforward and honest. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And hopefully they give you guys some buffs. And I will see you guys in the next video.